I would say not as in like, it's your fault or the blame is on you. Like there's no blame. I just think of generally if, I'm communicating something to someone or group of people and it doesn't get across, like my communication isn't received the way I want it to be received. So I have a certain message, I'm trying to share that message, they don't get it. Obviously, there's two sides to it. But I think one telling thing can be if that happens consistently, or more than one time in, different kind of scenarios, different people who are maybe even not related, but somehow, there's a common thread, then that to me is a clue on perhaps there's something for me to have a look at. I think either way, I don't have control of the other person or people, right? So what I have control of is me. And in this case, communication. Rather than, making it an issue, I look at it as, I try and look at it as, okay, what here, one, can I learn from? And two, I can adjust, or do differently. So if it's happening in different places and these people don't even know each other, but the consistent thing is like people don't really understand what I'm saying, they don't get it. That's kind of feedback without the verbal feedback, right? Like people didn't come to me and say, you're not being clear, but they're kind of saying it without saying it because it's not quite landing. So I would look at then, working on, in this case, you're talking about clarity. So intended clarity, like the message, going across. There is many aspects to it, right? Like, so clarity is most of the time, or a good chunk of it, I would say is, how can I take what I want to share and want to say and say it in the simplest way possible, right? So let's say if it was on the level of language, then, and this is actually common for, this happens to people who are English speakers as well, like native English speakers. Like we say things in very like flowery and complex ways sometimes, right? Or we just say it in kind of like a long way when actually it can be simplified. So clarity is simplifying things and making things, like they don't have to work for it basically, because especially, now, today, in our day and age, we're so spoiled with so much, technology and good things happening around us that we don't actually want to think. Like, we used to kind of just like scrolling, and then if you don't get the message, you just scroll to the next thing, and that doesn't work. You just scroll to something else that actually captures your attention. So we're kind of trained partly by, let's say, social media short form content kind of spoils us because whoever has actually put the work in to building that content, they have worked on really landing every single point and every single word. I think one thing that teaching yoga has taught me is to get clearer and clearer. And it's not something I'm done yet. I'm still learning myself, but I'm always exploring, because I'm saying the same thing in a yoga class. How can I say the same thing in a different way, but not so much that it's just different, but in a way that is digestible? Like they can take the information and, so to speak, digest it, like they can understand it, and ideally do something with it, like action it. So I think one is simplifying. Two, I think, it can be a practice of, obviously I'm speaking about this on the fly here, so I haven't gone like research and anything. I'm just going to say what's coming to me right now. Taking complex words and making them simpler. So one of the things I didn't kind of finish before was, when we're writing or like talking, speaking in a language that is, like a child can understand. And that's not looking down on the person that, we are communicating with. But I think if the message doesn't quite land, then I'm looking at, I would be looking at how can I say it in a way that maybe a 5-year-old or a 10-year-old can understand, assuming it's a topic that is, not like an adult topic. So in simpler language, clearer language, it's not just about saying less. It's about saying the right amount of stuff, not too much, not too little. Just the right amount of stuff for it to actually land. And if it doesn't land, then looking at ways of saying the same thing again, but in a different way. I've not, done like a, speaker training or anything like that. It's just all through teaching yoga. That's where my practice came from. Sometimes it's, using things like stories. So, like I'm putting my message into, I'm sharing an example or like a real life, like true story that's actually happening. So if I'm speaking to a friend and they don't quite get it, then it's like, okay, how can I say this and how can I share like the real experience that I'm having, if that's relevant to the conversation. But I guess it's a long-winded way of me saying I only have control of what I have control of, my side of it. So I'm going to put work into my communication. And I think we all, whether you're a native speaker in a language or not, I mean, language is one part of it. But, sometimes I find like people who are native English speakers, they're like terrible at actually getting a point across because, like they just flounce around. There's too much, too much happening, or they just don't say enough at all. And it's like, what do you mean? So, and you get the whole kind of spectrum of that. So it's not even about being a native speaker, but I think clarity is like, if my communication wasn't received in the way that I intended, like my message didn't get across, then that's feedback for me to look at how can I communicate it in a different way and all the different ways possible for it to actually be received. I think it's in NLP, like neuro-linguistic programming, where they talk about, the communication it's how it's actually received. I don't know the exact quote, but like, how it's received is feedback on the actual communication. So if it's not received well, then I'm looking at, okay, what can I bring to, for it to actually land? Sometimes, if it's like too long-winded and I'm just going around and around in circles, like it takes effort for people to try and work out, like, what the hell is he talking about? Right? And people, again, as I said, like we're trained to be lazy in our brains these days. We don't want to do work, right? So when it's too much, it'd be like, yeah, just shut down, and then they start paying attention to other things, and you're like, oh, you don't care about what I'm talking about. And it might not be because they don't care, like they probably do care, but some part of their brain, like they just trained to switch off, right? So it's just too much, too hard. I'm just going to like, oh, there's a distraction here. They're like, we're so messable with, we just get distracted so easily. You might find, that can happen. And when you talk about connection, like, we can lose connection with people or feel like they don't care. So therefore the connection kind of starts to dissipate, right? And separate over time or quite instantly. You're talking about, so this resulted in a loss of connection to a colleague I used to have a really good connection with. So I think, okay, if you had a really good connection, what was it before that allowed you to have that connection? And what has changed? So I would look at that as well. Is it something external? Is it something internal? Is it something that I have control, like agency over, I can influence, as in like my own communication? Is it my choice of words? Is it that also, like, we're not just speaking with words, right? Like words is just part of it. It's also non-verbal, like our body language and us paying attention and us not being like, like checking out while maybe they're communicating. Being a really good listener, like actually listening twice as much as, as we speak. Expressing the emotion, not just with words, like here in the UK, people are very good at actually saying the words like, oh, you're so wonderful, blah, blah, blah. But like there's no emotion in their face. And I'm not saying you're like this, but it's one example of like not showing, we're using our non-verbal, like our body. We're communicating not just with words, but with our body as well. Our hands, our body language. So all of that helps. Like, if I'm saying like, I'm really excited, you might not believe me that I'm actually quite excited. Or if I'm like, yeah, I'm really excited about this thing, right? Like that's me also using my body to express. So making sure that there's a congruence between my words and, my actions as well. Well, my body language, but following that, my actions also match. So everything is in alignment and things are not, what's the word, like clashing. My words say something, my body language says something else, and then my actions are doing something else. And you're like, what's going on? So these are all ways of bringing clarity, is like elements of clarity, that there's an alignment between all the parts of my communication, and then actions as well, I would say. So I'm going to read the question again. So it's saying, if people receive my intended clarity as rejection, is it on me to adjust? I would be curious on, like, how do you know it's a rejection? And if they told you, or if they communicated to you, I would look at, okay, then how come, like, I'm not communicating it as a no, but you've received it as a no. If there is that closeness with that person or people, I would actually ask them maybe for some feedback, like, what made you think it was a no? And they might say something that, like, maybe it's just you didn't consider, right? But for them on the receiving end, it's very obvious, because it's like it's hitting them. That's the communication. Okay, she told you. That's cool. Like if she told you, then there is some level of openness for them to communicate back with you. So if there's some level of openness and some kind of level of closeness for you to just be able to speak about that stuff, I would just ask for more feedback. And like, so she said, yeah, okay, I received it as a rejection. What made you think or feel it was? What about the thing I said or how I said it, my communication? Sometimes it's as simple as like a facial expression. Your words are saying one thing, your face is saying something else. It's like, huh? What's going on? Like you're not happy. It's like, are you not happy with something? What's going on? So if you have that relatedness, that closeness with that person, then it might be worth asking them for some more input. Having tried to improve my language and not got feedback. Yeah, I think generally most people are not going to risk, like don't want to be not nice, so they want to be nice. So they'll always try and just say the thing and just like it's all the short term, like, oh yeah, no, it's fine. But they're actually not saying the truth. So very few people will actually take the risk, in our lives to actually say how it is. And I think that's one of the powerful and beautiful things about our community is that, the work that we do, especially in a circle, there's a level of honesty about balance with compassion. So that's another part. Like it takes a lot for someone to actually be honest and just say the thing, but also sometimes people just say things and they need to balance it with a softness, a compassion. That could also be a thing with your communication as well. It might be that, maybe it's communicated with a certain directness or a certain kind of, intensity or power, but actually that's not how it was intended. So maybe it can be balanced with a softness that's brought to it as well. I don't know the exact situation. Having tried improving the language, I think, it's normal to feel like, yeah, I've been trying and I want to just give up. That's with anything, not just with communication. Like I've been trying and it's not being received. So I'm just going to give up. I'm just going to give up on people, or I'm just going to give up on trying to communicate to people. And, this is why people kind of get like socially weird and awkward, for example. Like they'll just rather talk to a computer or a device or just stay away from humans or whatever. Like they'll just make these like blanket rules and just be like, people don't understand me, or I'm misunderstood, or whatever it is. I'm not saying this is you, I'm just giving some examples, which is not true. So like, part of working on something and getting to a certain result is that when we try certain things, it might not work. And when it doesn't work, that's feedback for like, okay, what can I adjust, right? And communication is one of those things that I don't think we ever stop, learning to communicate better, because there's so many different people with different kind of where they come from in their lives, and, how their brain is wired and the kind of life that they've had and their map of the world. And every person, almost needs their own unique way of being communicated to. So I think it comes from, like understanding, and being understanding comes from like being really interested and curious about the other person or people, and then seek to be understood, seek to understand before you seek to be understood first, right? Like this, as the saying goes. So I think that's part of communication as well. And then communicating at the level of intensity and energy and expression that matches, and when it's too jarring, it just feels like, oh, we're there's a disconnect, like you're there and I'm here, and like we're not connected. It's a disconnect. So part of it is as well like being able to see, there's something within us that just wants, like a certain level of similarity, familiarity, so that our nervous system can relax and feel like, okay, I feel safe, I can trust you, and I'm willing to, hear what you have to say in the way that you're saying it. That's what I would say about the communication. I'd probably go on for more, but hopefully that gives you an answer and helps. And thank you for the question.